Welcome to the Invincible Ultimate Collection recap series, where I go over the greatest comic book series in the world. We're on volume 3 out of 12, and the comics really start to kick off. We see Invincible get an alert to go help out Rexplode with a fight. When he arrives, we see Rex pinned down by Octobos, so together they defeat him. Later, Rex is at the team's base looking for Duplicate and catches her with the Immortal. William talks to Mark about Rick going missing, and then Mark rushes to eat food with his mom. He gets a knock on the door and Science Dog is there, so he flies him into the sky. Robot steals Rex's DNA. Mark fights Science Dog and makes him explain himself, and he reveals himself to be an alien bug sent to find help to save his home planet. So Mark agrees against Cecil's orders. Mark says bye, then heads off into space in a ship. When they arrive, there's no immediate threat or danger like the bug said, and Mark is confused, but he's led to the Monarch, who is no other than Nolan, Mark's father. Issue number 26. Mark is shocked and squares up with Nolan before bursting into tears and hugging his father. Mark begs him to come back home to Earth, but he says he can't. Cecil checks in with Debbie. Meanwhile, Robot plans on using Rex's DNA to clone himself. Nolan explains to Mark what happened after their fight on Earth and how he found these people. He meets Andressa, Nolan's new wife, which pisses Mark off, but then Nolan shows him his baby brother. Issue number 27. Back on Earth, the really powerful villain from another universe, Omnipotus, faces every available hero, and a lot's going on. We see Donald, Cecil's assistant, is a robot. We're introduced to Tech Jacket, and he helps Adam Eve try to knock him over. Monster Girl fails to hurt him, and Robot is building a warp key to send him back. They fail, but then Black Samson appears, back from a coma, more powerful than ever, and he pushes Omnipotus into the warp key. Back in space, Nolan explains to Mark how the Viltrumite rules of interbreeding prohibits procreation with inferior beings, and they are on their way to kill the child and capture Nolan. He needs Mark's help, and he agrees, but suddenly, before they have time to react, Viltrumites break through the outside structures. Nolan orders Mark to take Andressa and his brother to the caves, so they fly off. There they talk for a while before getting interrupted by Viltrumite Lucan. Issue number 28. Lucan is stunned by the sight of Andressa and the baby, and Mark punches him off guard, but then flies off. They go but aren't fast enough, and Lucan quickly catches up, but just as he's about to grab Mark, he gets intercepted by Nolan. Mark catches a breath back on Earth. Immortal talks to Black Samson about changing and opening up to the team. Meanwhile, the Mauler twin cloned himself another. In space, Nolan returns covered in the Viltrumite's blood and tells Mark to take Andressa back to the caves. Then together they fly and see all the damage the Viltrumites caused. Issue number 29. Nolan grapples with his emotions towards the death of his new people and grabs Mark, but then two Viltrumites appear, so Nolan flies into one, knocking them both. They both fight until Mark jumps in. They both fight one by one and Mark gets choked, but before he passes out, Nolan saves him, and they just go at it, throwing blows. Nolan smashes one's head in, and head butts the other, and they think it's over, but then Lucan jumps out of the sky and kicks Nolan, breaking his back. Everyone passes out. Later, Mark wakes up to see his dad being captured, and a Viltrumite assigns him to take over Earth. Issue number 30. Mark helps fix the damages on the planet and speaks with Andressa, who tells him he needs to take his brother home with him. Sometime later, Mark arrives back on Earth and reunites with his mom, and tells her about Nolan and the child and everything, and she agrees to help raise them. Meanwhile, the Mauler twin killed his other and cloned himself again, and then Robot appears, proposing a job for them. Mark checks back in with Cecil and argues with him about leaving the planet, and then goes to his dorm to get ready and talks to William before leaving to see Amber. Issue number 31. Mark talks to his mom about raising the child, and Cecil calls him in. Meanwhile, the Mauler twins and Robot discuss their plans to create a new body for him. This villain, called Mastermind, who can put people under control, fights the Guardians of the Globe, and Black Samson and the Immortal get taken control of. In the sky, Mark drops a boulder and it lands on Mastermind, taking him out. Back at the dorm, William is upset with Mark for not searching for Rick, who disappeared. Eve calls Mark and invites him to Africa, and decides to bring Amber. We see Sinclair working on his Rhiannon. They go to Africa. Issue number 32. In Africa, Mark trains early morning, and Eve catches him, so they talk. She explains how her powers work, and she can rearrange atoms, and also how different Mark is from Amber being a superhero. Meanwhile, the Guardians of the Globe take out the Lizard League, and Shapesmith the Martian appears. In Africa, there's a stampede, so Mark and Eve rush to help out. After they have lunch, where Mark gets a phone call from his mom, but a mysterious voice is on the other line, so Mark flies off back home. When he gets there, he finds Angstrom Levy holding his mom and brother hostage. Issue number 33. Mark confronts Angstrom and explains how he's careless in other realities, and he blames him for exploding the machine and disfiguring him. He hits Debbie, and Mark flies towards him, but a portal appears, sending Mark to a reality where dinosaurs talk. Another portal opens, and Mark goes back to see Angstrom tossing his brother across the room. He sends Mark to another reality with Spider-Man and Doc Octopus. He sends Mark to the Walking Dead universe and countless realities until Mark's worn down. When a final portal appears, Mark waits a second before Angstrom pops out, grabbing him. They begin throwing blows back and forth through different realities until Mark has him pinned in a desert. He doesn't let up and gives Angstrom everything he has, beating him to a pulp. He thought he was stronger. Issue number 34. Eve flies Amber back home over the ocean, and they're worried about Mark. In the desert, Mark comes to the realization he's stranded in a random reality, and he almost loses his mind. Meanwhile, the Mahler twins succeed in creating a new body for Robot, but he double-crossed them and sends them back to prison. In the desert, a portal appears with the Guardians of the Globe from the future. They took 15 years to find this reality, and luckily by then they had time machines. Before they send Mark home, Eve from the future confesses her love, but when Mark gets back, he meets Amber and Eve and looks for Debbie and his brother. Cecil took them to the Pentagon for their injuries. They reunite, glad they're safe. Issue number 35. Cecil sends a tutor to Debbie to help raise Mark's brother, and they decide on the name Oliver. She briefs her on everything. Meanwhile, Mark takes out some random villain called Rampage. Cecil introduces the physical form of Robot to the Guardians of the Globe, who are weirded out. After, he explains he did it for Amanda, aka Monster Girl, and he asks her on a date. Mark visits Art the tailor for girl advice about Amber and Eve. He likes them both, but ultimately decides to stay with Amber. They also talk about Nolan, and the last thing he said was to read his books, which Art has on him. Mark figures out the books contain information on weaknesses to the Viltrumites, and his dad's telling him how to beat them. And that's everything from Volume 3 of the Ultimate Invincible recap series. Thank you guys all for watching, and be sure to like, comment, and subscribe. I'll see you guys later.